Is everyone here, Miss Elvia?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. I'll wait till it's 7 straight up.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome, and at this time, the City Council is returning from recess at our 6 p.m. closed session meeting. We did have roll call. So at this time, we will begin with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, we are very happy to have with us Pastor Tim Peck of Glen Kirk Church. He will lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our Assistant City Manager, Moises Lopez. With that, Pastor Peck.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to lead in the invocation tonight. If you'd like to, would you bow your head and join me in prayer? Lord, I lift up this council meeting to you, knowing that you are actively involved in wanting the flourishing of our community. And so I pray that the decisions that are made tonight would lead to that flourishing. I pray that the conversations that happen would be edifying and uplifting to you, God. And Lord, I pray your blessing upon the business of this meeting. Lord, I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
You will please put your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you, Moises, for leading us in the pledge. Next item on the agenda is student reports, and tonight we have none. That next is reordering of and additions to the agenda. Does anyone wish to reorder or add anything to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, that takes us to public comment. Tonight we invite members of the public to address the City Council. You have 3 minutes to speak. If you wish to request to speak, we invite you to please select the raise hand icon in Zoom before the close of the public comment period, and you will be called on when it is your turn to speak. Also, residents have the option of sending public comment via email at publiccomment@cityofglendora.org. At this time, do we have anyone wishing to speak, or have we received any written correspondence?
Thank you, Mayor. We have received one public comment via the website via the email before 5 o'clock, which was added to the agenda packet and made available to the public and sent to council. Aside from that, we have received one request to speak via the attendees and no other requests via email. So at this time, Josina, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you very much, Mayor Davis, council members, city staff. My name is Joe Cena, President and CEO of the Glendora Chamber of Commerce, and I thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. The Glendora Chamber continues to hold our live networking opportunities 2 to 3 times a month now. We also have workshops that are coming up and other learning opportunities regarding cybersecurity and more for our business community to be part of. So we invite them to participate and in these events and the many services that the Chamber of Commerce has to offer. I'm also excited to see agenda item 15 tonight coming about, hopefully finalizing so we can get it started. Since our discussion over the last several months, it would be great to get much needed funds to our business community. Even more critical because all the past grants have pretty much been exhausted. So this pool of funds is really the only thing available at this time besides loans. And many business owners are in enough debt, so applying for more would probably hurt more than it helped. Also, based on the draft of the program guidelines that you'll be discussing, I really don't see any problems going through and getting this money to the business community. Compared to the CDBG grant program, which had all of the limitations, as we all know, this doesn't, which, as you know. So I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to get a lot of business owners to qualify. And I mean, just to be, for an example, out of the 70 business owners I talked to for the other program, I would say nearly all of them would qualify for this, that we couldn't get money to them. So that said, I'm looking forward to it. And all the business owners have to do is apply. So I look forward to seeing what you discuss later on and being able to launch the program when it's ready. So again, thank you for your willingness to support our local business community, and hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sina. Do we have anyone else?
We have no further requests to give public comment at this time, Mayor.
Okay. Then I will close public comment and bring it back to the City Council for comments and reports. At this time, I'll call on Mr. Friedendahl.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome, everybody. And the only thing I invite us all to do is in the exciting month of October, with lots of social opportunities coming up toward the end of the month and seasonal activities, our community has once again gone above and beyond to provide many Halloween related opportunities, including Pumpkin Festival this coming weekend, and then of course the trick or treat walk for our youth, and then festival at the park on Halloween weekend. So take advantage of that. Go check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alawas.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to extend on David's comment about the Pumpkin Festival this Saturday. The hours are from 10 to 3. And if you're hungry, the Knights of Columbus is going to be preparing breakfast for you. So hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Matt. I'm sorry, I thought I was on mute. Madam Mayor, thank you and welcome to everybody. I just wanted you to know that the Dodgers score is 2-0. The Dodgers are ahead, so we celebrate that. Very pleased to hear that the Glendora schools and the city are nearing wrapping up an MOU for the use of the fields. That has been something that we've been trying to get for a couple of months now, probably even more than that. So very happy to hear that we are close to getting that done. The goal line continues to move ahead and seeing a lot of work done. Bridges on Foothill and Grand, as well as the one across Route 66, are being worked on. I would encourage you to go down and see what they're doing. The footings are being put in, and excellent work is being done there. We did have a large sum of rail dropped about a month ago, and we anticipate another rail drop, which will be the last one toward the end of this year. And so that will be good and complete that. Freight line has been extended through the end of this month, so there is no freight train being moved through our city, which enables work to happen, and we're happy about that. I think everything else is going well. We're ahead of pace. Budget wise, we're right on as to where we should be. So very happy to report that. And with that, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Thanks, Karen. again, adding on to, some of the upcoming events, tomorrow night down at Spaghetti Eddie's, the police department is hosting the Pink Patches and Pasta. So if you go down, have dinner at Spaghetti Eddie's tomorrow evening between 5:30 and 8:30, there will be some pink patches and other things there for purchase and for contributions to help support breast cancer awareness. And enjoy dinner, and a portion of the proceeds will go to that as well. A week from Friday, October 22nd, will be our annual Halloween movie in the park. That will be, you know what, I didn't look up, see what the movie was before I spoke. But anyway, it's going to be a good one. But that'll be starting right about dark, around 6 o'clock or so. But yeah, come on down and enjoy watching the movie on Friday, October 22nd. On the 29th, the Walk in the Village, a Halloween walk, is actually going to be on Friday, the 29th. That takes place from 10 to 2 o'clock. So everyone in the area of the village will help celebrate with 3,000 of little rugrats running around all over the place. And if you're driving in the area, please make sure and be careful. And then the Halloween Carnival on Saturday, the 30th, is taking place at Finkbeiner Park between 5 and 8 p.m. On a couple of other notes, I just wanted to note that Foothill Transit has made a decision to purchase 30 hydrogen fuel cell buses that will be joining their fleet of battery-powered electric buses. They probably won't be delivered for about a year and a half, but Foothill Transit continues to lead the way in trying to get to zero emissions for public transportation in California. And then the last note is, as we all know, we're continuing to see a low amount of precipitation. Our water levels in the area are getting very low. We're not at the levels that we were at in 2018 when we hit record lows, but it's imperative that everybody continue to conserve where you can, and hopefully we'll see a lot of rain this winter. That's it. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. And I believe the movie is Addams Family.
That's right. Thank you.
Yes. With that, Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to report?
Not tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Winder, anything you'd like to mention?
Nothing, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That takes us into special items. Our first special item tonight is an opportunity to recognize one of our employees who is retiring, Mr. Chris Lubbock. He has worked with the city of Glendora for 36 years. That is pretty amazing. I was going to say, Chris, you must have started as a very young man. And right there, we see the photographic evidence of that. So that is tremendous. Chris is someone who his personality and his work ethic is similar to that which he has worked on as a maintenance lead worker in the Public Works Department, working on streets. He is the kind of person that has been a solid worker, the foundation for the Public Works Department. He is someone who is quiet and steadfast, always has a smile, always waving at everyone as they go by, and is very resilient and persevered throughout the 36 years that Chris has worked for the city of Glendora. Been a lot of ups and downs, lots of changes, and Chris has been one of those steadfast workers that has continued to do his best and contribute to the success of the city. So we thank you, Chris, for all that you have done. We will miss you, but know that we'll see you around. And I believe that there with you, that Public Works Director Allison Sweet has a plaque that we will be giving to you. And that plaque reads, Christopher Lubbock, Maintenance Lead Worker, Public Works Department, 1985 to 2021. Thank you for your commitment to providing outstanding service to the city of Glendora. Your dedication, abilities, and contributions are greatly appreciated. Congratulations on your retirement. And with that, I'll turn it over to Allison for some comments, and I believe that Laura is there as well, Laura Shanilia.
Yes,
So-
I'll go ahead and have Laura speak first. Laura should be on the call, I saw. Oh,
I'm
well,
on here, but I don't have video.
okay,
Okay.
go ahead, Laura.
Okay. So as you said, Chris worked here for over 36 years, and I had the pleasure of working with him since January 2014. He was hired as a maintenance worker on July 22nd, 1985. He was then promoted to motor sweeper operator, which I never knew we even had, on February 23rd, 1987. Then he was promoted to maintenance lead worker on September 6th, 1999, which is the position that he held when he retired from the city just a couple weeks ago. I talked to some people that worked closely with him, and it was overwhelmingly the same responses to describe him. Chris is described as dependable, reliable, always available, never complained about being on call or being called out in the middle of the night. Chris was primarily a concrete worker, but he learned all the facets of the streets division, including signs and paint and asphalt and everything that all of those entailed. He knew the historic value of Glendora and was proud to both live and work there. And I went through his file just to see some of the stuff in there that I didn't know about him. And there were thank you notes and emails from residents over the 36 years, which all also had the same theme. Chris was very professional, very courteous, very careful, gave great attention to detail. He went above and beyond. He always did his work thoroughly. He was selfless and kind. And there's one particular note that I wanted to read that stood out to me. It was written to his supervisor in 1989. And it says, "This morning, our van was stuck in the middle of the street, perpendicular to the curb, so that it blocked the whole street. My husband and I were trying to push it without much success. Just at that time, a street sweeper was coming along, and Chris, the driver, stopped and jumped out to see what he could do to help. He and my husband managed to push it enough so that it could roll back to the curb. We're very grateful to Chris for getting us out of our predicament. He was willing to do whatever he could to help us out. That kind courtesy is great." So I thought that was neat. He just represented the city in the best way back in 1989. A couple of personal things about Chris that people told me. He's a very kind family man. He loves old and vintage cars and apparently even used to race in the drags, which I never knew that. He's a fan of Angels baseball, which Karen, you know, I love, and Mendel. I was also told that Chris sported the nickname Peanut Butter at work for a time because of his love of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and that was pretty much all he ate for a time. So Chris, we are going to miss you in Public Works very much and at the City of Glendora. Your loyalty and dedication have been the best of the best. We're grateful to you for your over 36 years of service, and we thank you for all that you did for us and for the city. May you have all the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that your heart desires, along with vintage cars and Angels baseball games. Please keep in touch and stop by to say hi when you see us around town. Thank you again for everything, and a huge congratulations to you.
Thank you so much, Laura.
You're welcome.
All right, and then Chris, I just wanted to add a few words that it's been a pleasure. I've had the opportunity to work with you for the last 5 years, the last 5 years of your career. Day and night, Chris has responded to emergencies while the rest of us are sleeping. Chris's contributions aren't noticed unless there are problems, and then they're fixed. Everyone notices the problem, but has a hard time remembering all the potholes that are fixed and all the uplifted sidewalks and the down signs and the debris in the roads. All the things that you have touched has made Glendora a wonderful place to live and work. And Public Works are first responders for emergencies. And Chris is instrumental in getting us through the Colby fire, the K-rails, the aftermath of the mudslides, and all the setups and tear downs that he's done for traffic control to make our residents stay safe for city parades, and most recently the downtown parklets. And this would not have happened without Chris's work ethic and dedication. And then just speaking for all of us in Public Works, you know, managers and staff, we just wish you a well-deserved retirement. And in Public Works tradition, we are going to allow you 3 iWorks citizen complaints.
Okay.
All right, those will go free for you. So anyway, again, congratulations.
Allison, thank you so much. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
City Council and Madam Mayor.
All right, we'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Adam.
At this time, did any of the rest of the council or Adam want to say anything briefly before we go to our next item?
Well, I'll just pitch in here, you know, Chris, it's one of those things, you're the guy that is out there taking care of everything that the people of the city don't know about. And the residents of this community will be forever grateful to what you've done. I moved to Glendora in 1980, so you started not long after I first got here. But as I will speak for myself and I'll speak for most of the residents here, we appreciate all the work that you and the entire team has done to take care of the city all these years. Thank you for your service.
Chris, obviously I was unsuccessful in talking you out of retirement, but I wish you all the best going forward. And, you know, you're going to be missed with, as Karen mentioned, as waving as you go by, your positive, infectious attitude that you've had and you still have. I'm going to miss it dearly, and I'm sure the rest of the residents will as well. So Godspeed on your retirement. I hope you don't get too bored. Maybe you'll come back and look us up and say, hey, I want to come back on a part-time basis. Best of luck.
That's a possibility, Michael. Thank you.
I'm sure Adam and Allison can take care of you.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, this is David. Congratulations. Thank you for your service and your dedication. And every town has 1 or 2 of guys like you. Don't worry about what the map says. You say, no, dig here, because you know where things really are. So please be willing. Don't get out of retirement. That's a wonderful thing. Go discover it. But please answer your phone if we say, hey, where is something? We need your expertise. So congratulations. Godspeed.
You got it. Thank you.
Chris, thanks a lot for everything that you've done. You've set a model for your entire team, and I hope that they're going to be you know, able to equal the spirit and the work that you've done. The Angels definitely need your support. As Laura said, I'm an Angel fan, a Dodger fan for right now, but the Angels need you too. So best of luck. I pray that your health will be strong and that you'll have just great years to just enjoy life. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
And Chris, for your service and best wishes on this next chapter of your life.
And Mayor, I would just only add a big thank you to Chris myself. He always showed up. He never got too excited. There are several really long-term employees that have retired, and Chris, I'll be sad to see you go. I know we'll see you around, but every time you showed up to something, it was been there, done that 10,000 times over, didn't get real excited, and it always got done. And so we're definitely going to miss having that positive attitude around here, and best of luck in your retirement.
Thank you, and I will see all of you around at some point, I'm sure.
Karen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I really didn't want to hear the COVID update. I think that's why. Thank you, Chris. Mr. Raymond, take it away for the COVID-19 reopening of the economy.
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. Brief update this evening. since we last met and provided an update. In Los Angeles County, there have been a couple new changes. Effectively at wineries, bars, nightclubs, proof of vaccination with at least one shot is now in effect. If you go to one of those establishments in LA County and you are asked that question, that is because of a health officer order that was issued. Full vaccination in those areas will be required by November 3rd, and that's both for patrons, indoor activities, wineries, breweries, and nightclubs, both visitors and employees. Additionally, for mass events, those more than 10,000 people, for example, if you were at the Dodger game this evening in Los Angeles County, you would require full proof of vaccination. So if you're planning your activities, make sure you understand what the rules are before you attend some of those activities. And just lastly, I would add, Mayor, there's been some confusion in LA County. The city of Los Angeles has more stringent regulations as it relates to activities that are open for vaccinations. And really, if you have any questions out there, we encourage you to contact the city and ask questions, or visit the county's website, visit the city's website for the health officer orders. And just lastly, next week, Cal OSHA will meet to talk potentially about some vaccination standards for all employers more than 100 individuals. As we know information, we'll share it. But this is one of those times in the state of California where the state has a different set of rules than some counties, and it can be confusing. We understand all different points of view and frustrations, and look forward to helping clarify any answers that we can. Just lastly, I would add, the city has not added at any point during the pandemic any more restrictions that are already in place. We've only tried to seek guidance and understanding and clarity with both our county and state partners. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to the next item on our agenda, Redistricting 2020 update. I'd like to invite City Clerk, Communications Director Kathleen Sussman to report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight I'm here to present a brief update on the city's 2020 redistricting. I was actually hoping to be able to present a more locked down timeline, but as most of you know, as of the last council meeting, we were actually still waiting on the census data from the state. And we have, I'm happy to announce that we have actually received that census data. A set of the data was provided to the city on September 20th, but there were issues with that data. So an updated set of information was given to us and NDC on September 27th. Now we are waiting. NDC has reviewed that information and has submitted it to the mapping software vendor so that the data could be uploaded into that system and utilized to draw district maps. Unfortunately, the mapping system with the 2020 census data has not gone live yet. I am hoping to receive an update on that on Friday, October 15th, and then depending on what that information looks like will depend on what we can do moving forward. Originally, next week, we were going to be conducting a community workshop specifically designed at helping people design district maps. If the mapping software has not been updated, we might need to conduct a special council meeting instead in order to stay on time on the time frame we need to follow in order to adopt the ordinance and the final map by the December 15th, 2021 deadline. I'm available to answer any questions. Just for the benefit of the audience, agenda item 12 is actually requesting for council direction on canceling a meeting in November 23rd. I'm still recommending we cancel that meeting. I think it would be better to have a special meeting either on October 16th or the 30th in which to introduce the ordinance than to get in the middle of people's holiday plans. So again, I'm here to answer any questions, and depending on the information I receive on Friday, hopefully I'll have an update to send out to the council members.
Thank you, Ms. Sussman. Do any of the council members have any questions?
I'm sorry.
Your
there you go.
volume is, yeah, your volume is almost it's too low at this point. If you can maybe turn up the volume on your computer.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, now we can.
Okay. Great. Do any of the council members have any questions?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Well, hearing none, thank you, Ms. Sussman. Appreciate that. And thank you for your patience and perseverance with all of this census situation that continues to drag out. I know it's created quite a mess for everyone. So thank you. All right, that takes us to our next item tonight, a proclamation by the City Council in observance of October 2021 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month. You might have noticed that many of us tonight are wearing pink in recognition of that. And tonight, to receive the presentation from the Glendora Police Department Record Specialist Amanda Larson and Julie Vargas. And I will now share that proclamation and then turn it over to them to share a few words. Whereas October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and whereas early detection greatly improves the chances for successful treatment and survival, mammography is the best available method of detecting abnormalities which may be cancer long before physical symptoms can be seen or felt. And whereas the Glendora Police Department has participated in the Pink Patch Project for the past 6 years in support of organizations that provide education and bring breast cancer awareness to the community. And whereas the Glendora Police Department's Pink Patch Project has raised money by selling customized pink patches and other apparel, they have held fundraisers at restaurants and coffee shops, accepting donation tips, and raised over $30,000 has been donated to the City of Hope. And whereas we proudly support studies aimed at discovering better screening methods, developing more effective treatments, and improving our understanding of this disease. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Glendora, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2021 as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Glendora. We further appreciate coordinators and supporters of the Pink Patch Project who help promote programs that bring awareness of breast cancer and the importance of consulting with healthcare providers about regular checkups and mammograms. So just a reminder to all the women out there and to everyone else to remind the women in your life to make sure that they get those regular checkups and avail themselves of all that is available in the prevention and early detection. With that, I turn it over to Ms. Larson and Ms. Vargas.
Thank you, Mayor Davis and the council members. The Pink Patch Project is a public awareness campaign designed to bring attention to the fight against breast cancer. Through the sales of the collectible uniform patches, public safety agencies are helping to accomplish this goal and to end breast cancer. Current statistics show that 1 in 8 women will develop breast cancer in their lifetime. Unfortunately, breast cancer also affects men, though very rarely. The Pink Patch Project has sold over 900,000 patches and raised over $1.4 million that goes for research and treatment. And over 500 agencies from around the world now participate in the Pink Patch Project. This is huge considering that this project started here locally in 2013 at Seal Beach Police Department. When one of their own developed breast cancer, they turned their patches pink in support. In 2015, then Police Chief of Irwindale Police Department, Anthony Miranda, brought the idea to the Los Angeles County Police Chiefs Association, where they adopted the Pink Patch Project. 25 local agencies started the project, and today it has expanded worldwide. Other public safety agencies have now also partnered with the Pink Patch Project to include the Sheriff Department, Fire, EMS, and federal law enforcement agencies. Statistics show that early detection is key for treatment and survival. So as you mentioned, next time you have one of those doctor visits, feel free to discuss it with your doctor, have that conversation started early. You can also help us spread awareness here in Glendora.
This year's 2021 Pink Patch will be available in the police department lobby for $10 a piece. We'll also have previous year's patches available for $5 each. All proceeds from patches sold will be donated to breast cancer research. And tomorrow night, we have our Pink Patches and Pasta event at Spaghetti Eddie's from 5:30 to 8:30. We hope to see you all there. Bring your family for some delicious food for a worthy cause. We'd really like to thank you all so much for recognizing and supporting this project. And thank you so much for wearing your pink. We love it.
And I'll just jump in and say, if you want to come to Pasta tomorrow night, I could be your server and I'll have a handful of these for sale. So tip well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for being here tonight and sharing that information with us. And thank you for your ongoing efforts as part of the Pink Patch Project. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to our public hearings tonight. We have none. That takes us to our consent calendar. The items on the consent calendar can be approved with one motion. I understand that item 12 has been pulled for separate discussion. So do we have a motion to approve items 7 through 11?
I would move that. Mendel.
I'll second it. Michael.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alawas, a second by, motion by Councilmember Thompson, a second by Councilmember Alawas. I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas.
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Yes.
And Mayor Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That takes us to item 12 then, approving a memorandum of agreement with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments for a regional food recovery program. City Manager Raymond.
Good evening, Mayor. I believe Allison Sweet and Andrea Ampig are on the call this evening. Oh, yes, to do item 12 and along with a COG representative as well. Allison, if you wouldn't mind introducing the item.
All right, thank you. So Andrea Ampig and Alexander Fung from the San Gabriel COG will be presenting. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Management Analyst Andrea Ampig.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have Alex Fung from the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments here to present about the regional food recovery program that the city is interested in participating in. This is one of the components of complying with the upcoming organic waste recycling law, SB 1383. So I will hand it over to Alex to begin his presentation.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council. It is an honor to be here, and thank you so much for inviting the COG to provide you with a presentation on our regional food recovery program. As some of you may know, the COG has undertaken a regional efforts to support cities to comply with SB 1383, a bill that I'm sure a lot of us have heard about over the past couple of years. And it's our pleasure to provide you an overview of our presentations for the council's consideration to see if the city of Glendora would like to participate in this regional endeavor. And my name is Alex. I'm a senior management analyst with the COG, and I'll serve as a project manager for this program. Next slide, please. And next slide. Thank you so much. So just as a quick recap on SB 1383. So this bill was passed in 2016, written by Senator Lara back then, and it serves as a statewide effort to reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants and sets two specific targets. The first one being reducing statewide disposal of organic waste by half by January 1st of last year. and by 75% by January 1st of 2025, and that is calculated based on 2014 levels. The second goal is to recover at least 20% of currently disposed edible food for human consumption by 2025. Next slide, please. So CalRecycle is the entity, is the state agency that is going to be regulating cities' compliance to SB 1383. So based on the guidelines that were adopted by CalRecycle, the regulations to meet statewide organic waste reductions and food recovery requirements will begin to take effect on January 1st of next year. And additionally, regulations may require local jurisdictions to impose penalties for non-compliance on regulated entities starting January 1st of 2024. Next slide, please. So I'm focusing on the food recovery regulations within SB 1383. So as mentioned, SB 1383 is trying to accomplish the goal of recovering 20% of edible foods that would otherwise be sent to landfills by 2025. So as a result, the regulations that were adopted by CalRecycle requires local jurisdictions to establish food recovery programs and strengthen their existing food recovery networks. Additionally, the food donors must arrange to recover the maximum amount of their edible food that would otherwise go to landfills. Cities and counties must implement food recovery programs to assist food donors to increase food recovery. And for our local food recovery organizations and agencies that are participating in SB 1383, they must maintain records. Next slide, please. And essentially, SB 1383 requires each jurisdiction to implement an edible food recovery program because essentially it's trying to accomplish the goal of feeding individuals experiencing hunger, eliminating food waste, creating new green-collar jobs, strengthen relationships between food donors and food recovery organizations, and build more resilient communities. So this is the vision for SB 1383's food recovery regulations. Next slide, please. So SB 1383 places commercial edible foods generators into two tiers. So what are commercial edible food generators? These are venues or facilities or places that would have the possibility of generating food waste. So SB 1383 placed these generators into two tiers. Tier 1 specifically are supermarkets, grocery stores, food service providers, food distributors, and wholesale food vendors. And tier 2 generators are a little bit larger. They're the large restaurants, hotels, health facilities with on-site food facility, large venues and events, state agency cafeterias, local education agency with an on-site food facility, and other non-local entities. And within the city of Glendora, there are about 12 tier 1 generators and about 15 tier 2 generators based on our consultant's calculation. Next slide, please. So all jurisdictions must identify a list of commercial edible food generators that have allocations within their jurisdictions in order to provide education and outreach to their tier 1 and tier 2 generators by February 1st of next year, and assess their community's current food recovery capacity and plan for additional capacity if it is insufficient to accommodate the amount of food that commercial edible food generators must send to food recovery organizations. Next slide, please. And additionally, cities and counties have to inspect the food generators to verify that they have established a contract or written agreements for food recovery and that the generators are maintaining records of their food donation activities. Cities and counties also have to post contact information for food recovery organizations on their websites so that their local food generators can identify which organizations can potentially accept their food if they have food waste. Next slide, please. So finally, jurisdictions will also be required to monitor food donors' compliance with 1383's edible food recovery requirements. Beginning on January 1st of next year, cities must have an enforcement and inspection program that includes inspections to verify that there are edible food recovery contracts and written agreements in place, there are record-keeping protocols in place, and that mandated food donors offer for donation the maximum amount of edible food that they would otherwise dispose. Inspections of tier 1s must begin in 2022, and for tier 2s, they must begin in 2024. Jurisdictions can choose to combine inspections of mandated food donors with existing mandatory inspections of food facilities if they wish. Next slide, please. So before I go on further, I just covered SB 1383's food recovery regulations in the past couple of slides. And I know that was a lot of information, and even the regulations themselves are a lot and overwhelming for a city to take on. But diving into why and how the COG got involved with this regional food recovery program. So in March, several of the San Gabriel Valley cities expressed an interest in participating in a regional endeavor to support comply with 1383's food recovery regulations. And this is because cities believe that having a regional endeavor can achieve economies of scale that's typically is cheaper when cities work together to accomplish things. So our COG, after discussing with our city managers and our public works TAC, we have subsequently agreed to serve as the entity that would lead this program and hire a consultant to provide the necessary services and support. Next slide, please. So these are our 14 participating cities that have confirmed and expressed their interest in this program. And that includes the city of Glendora, if the council chooses to proceed tonight. Next slide, please. So really quickly, I will go over this program's scope of work, and that includes a capacity and compliance, outreach and education, a final report, and inspection. And I'll quickly go over each of these briefly. Next slide, please. Under capacity and compliance, so our consultants would assess potential edible food recovery agencies in the city of Glendora's jurisdictions, identify and evaluates the processing capacity of such agencies, and identify and evaluates whether these agencies have existing contracts with your food waste generators. So there's contracts and agreements in place to eliminating food waste. Additionally, our consultants will calculate if additional capacity is needed for the city to recover the required amount of edible food, identify the infrastructure needed, and identify opportunities for the city to fund such infrastructure if that is necessary. We would also identify the city's local tier 1 and tier 2 generators, assess their food recovery capacity, and if they're in compliance with SB 1383's food recovery protocols. Next slide, please. On to outreach and education. So our consultants would develop an outreach and education plans for your local tier 1 and tier 2 food waste generators, just help them to understand what are the regulations that are coming down from the state level and what they would need to do within the next couple of years, essentially. So some of the outreach strategies that we would utilize would include direct email outreach, social media postings, website postings, and also having regional educational workshops with recordings available. And all of the outreach records will be provided to the city for CalRecycle reporting purposes. Next slide, please. And finally, the consultants would develop a final report to include details on the outreach efforts that were conducted, on the assessments that were performed under the capacity and compliance task, as well as highlighting the food recovery needs and operations of your local generators and your local food recovery agencies. Finally, the report would also include recommendations on the necessary steps that cities can further consider to ensure 1383 compliance. Next slide, please. And finally, there's the inspection components. This was actually added at the recommendation of our interested cities. So the inspection program, which cities can choose to opt in if they would like, would direct our consultants to develop and implement inspections of the city's tier 1s and tier 2 food waste generators and food recovery agencies. So inspections of this program for tier 1 will begin on January 1st of next year, while inspections for tier 2 will begin on January 1st of 2024. By law, the consultants does not have the authority to issue citations because that is the city's jurisdiction, but the consultants will collaborate with the city to issue educational materials and citations. Next slide, please. So if the city chooses to join this regional endeavor, this is what it will look like for the city of Glendora for the inspection piece. The consultants would be responsible for developing and implementing an inspection schedule and plan, which also includes a mechanism that allows for the submissions of anonymous complaints and determining the validity of those complaints. The consultants will also develop and implement an effective method to inform the city to issue educational materials and/or citations in the events that non-compliance is identified during inspections. Based on the cost that was provided, if the city chooses to participate, the consultants will provide up to 15 first visits to your local tier 1 generators every year from 2022 to 2024, as well as up to 15 second visits to your local tier 1 generators for the next 3 years. Also up to 18 first visits to your local tier 2 generators for the next 3 years. And finally, it includes 3 food recovery organization inspection visits for the next 3 years as well. So we do understand that the city currently has about 12 tier 1 generators and about 15 tier 2 generators. We did include additional tier generators just in case, given that perhaps the city expects new businesses to pop up over the next couple of years. So we also want to make sure that those are taken into account as well. Next slide, please. So this is probably the most important slide, talking about cost and the timeline. So for tasks 1 through 4, so that is the capacity and compliance assessments, the public outreach activities, and the final reports. So the first 3 bullet points, the first 3 components, those will be completed by February 2022, as stated by the 1383 regulations. The participation cost for the city for tasks 1 through 4 is not to exceed $19,785 per city. For tasks 5 to 6, so that is the optional inspection program. If the city chooses to participate in the inspection program, that will extend the schedule of work and the scope of work for this program through August 1st of 2024. Task 5, which is for the consultants to lay the foundations and develop that inspection program prior to implementations. It's the cost is not to exceed $2,299 per city. And for task 6, the participation cost is not to exceed $91,323. And I apologize, there's a typo on the screen. It's not per city for task 6. That is, the amount is calculated based on the city's tier 1 and tier 2 generators and local food recovery organizations. And I do want to stress that the $91,000 amount is stretched over the course of 3 years. So it's about close to $30,000 per year for inspections. And the amount, as indicated, is not to exceed, because our consultants will only bill the city for the actual amount of inspections that were completed. So if there were less inspections that were completed, it may not act like the amounts that the city may get billed may actually be less than what is shown here on the screen. So after a comprehensive procurement process, our COG has selected SCS engineers to provide professional support services for this project. So with that, I believe that was my last slide. And I know this was a lot of information, and I'll pass it back to Andrea, but I'm also happy to take any questions that the council may have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Alex. Next slide. Thank you. So I just wanted to note that I had originally made an estimate of the cost per year for task 6 before the final cost was determined by the COG and the consultants, which is why the pricing is not correctly reflected on the agenda and staff report. And this pricing that Alex stated does include the pricing for the inspection program as well as the education and outreach portion. And that is what I will show on the slide after this one. But first, I wanted to emphasize that the city did evaluate our options for compliance with the food recovery program and found that partnering with the COG and the other San Gabriel Valley cities was the best option to provide a comprehensive program for the city. And there are very specific requirements such as the record keeping, inspections and reporting aspects that city staff wouldn't be able to handle on our own. And Athens Services provided some services that would assist with the food recovery program, but we found that their approach was more general since they focus more on the collection of the post-consumer waste stream. And we also didn't want to risk any costs of implementing this program to be reflected on the residents' trash bills. And the next slide will conclude my presentation with the recommendations. The price reflected there does include tasks 1 through 6 that Alex mentioned, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you.
And for the public joining us tonight, I would recommend that you view the city council meeting from last month. Andrea did a tremendous job along with Cal Recycle and Athens going over Senate Bill 1383, giving us a lot of detailed information of what all is involved in that and what we can expect. So if you want more background, that would provide that. Thank you, Alex, for explaining the COG's involvement in this. And does anyone else have any questions or brief comments?
I do, Karen.
Okay, Mr. Alawas.
Thank you. Alexander and Andrea, great presentation, a lot of information to unpack there. The question that I have is that, so once, if we contract with the COG to do this, you've outsourced it to the folks to do the analysis, and then after the fact to do the inspection process. What is left then for the city to do, since if we go with Athens to do the one portion of the collection of the food waste, and then we contract with your folks on the outside to contract for the usable food, what does the cities then have to do at that point in time?
Councilman, really quickly before we answer that, Elvia, can you go back one slide? So when we talk about the provisions that are there, just wanted to make sure we all keep this graphic in mind. Councilman, I think it'll help answer some of the questions that we're only talking about this specific portion this evening.
Right. Right. I know that we have the two different pieces of that, but so then the folks that the COG hires will do the analysis first, and then they will do the yearly inspections, correct?
That is absolutely correct, Council Member, and thank you so much for your question. Just to clarify, the COG, if the city decides to participate in this program, will handle most of the legwork. The only remaining task that the city would have to do for the inspection piece is to maintain the record keeping, which our COG will provide all of the information needed for the city. But ultimately, each jurisdiction must provide records when requested by Cal Recycle. So essentially, we'll just hand the information to the staff, and when Cal Recycle requests the information, then city staff will be able to easily locate like the data and all of the documentation needed so that city staff can send it to Cal Recycle there.
So since this is an unfunded mandate, are there any grants available out there?
I believe there is. The COG partnered with the League of California Cities to advocate for $225 million from the legislature to be allocated to cities for SB 1383 and solid waste like endeavors. I believe a proposal for about $50 to $60 million is still on the table and considered by the governor. The COG is closely tracking that. Aside from that, we know that I believe cities could have used their AB 939 or AB 1826 hauler funds, but that depends on how the city structures the use of their hauler funds. But aside from those funding sources, I believe, unfortunately, it is an unfunded mandate.
Are there any other sites already identified to take the secondhand food?
I suppose I can try to take that question. So right now we do have partnered with the county to locate all of the food recovery agencies within the San Gabriel Valley and across the county. I believe the city of Glendora actually has at least 2 on site. So it's great to hear that there are local food recovery organizations where like your commercial edible food generators can send food waste to. But I believe, not to drag on the answer longer, but we're partnering with the county to build more infrastructure to make sure that there's enough food recovery agencies to take on all of the food waste that are needed.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Councilman. I was just going to ask Alex to clarify for the group. He touched on it early. It's the excess food. And Alex, do you mind just talking a little bit about the excess food, not all food, and sort of walk through some of that methodology with 1383 in your slide on what needs to be recovered?
Yeah, sure. In a sense, this bill wants to provide a mechanism that is very easy and effective for, let's say, your local supermarket to be able to donate the food that is about to go bad. So part of what we've covered earlier is to make sure that your local, like for the entities that are subject to SB 1383, like large restaurants and supermarkets, that they have agreements in place with your local food recovery organizations so that those food that is about to go bad can be recovered quickly before they go bad. Hopefully that answers your question, Councilman.
Well, that's going to tie into I have a bunch of other questions, but I'm going to trim it to one more here. This last question, is there any liability to the food providers on the food that they do send in case, maybe it's on the verge of going bad, or there might be something possibly wrong they didn't see? Do they have any coverage of liability from this program?
I believe under the current state law, there's a Good Samaritan's like protocols or regulations in place that can help prevent liability issues. But we also have legal support on our team just to make sure that like your local generators wouldn't be held liable. And yeah, but that is a great question.
And I'll jump in and answer that a little bit. A lot of this is currently happening already. That many of the stores, it just needs to be more generalized and streamlined, but many of them already have agreements with local nonprofits where they provide that food. And the receiving end of that, many of those people are required to have food handling certification and licenses so that they know what food can be accepted when. So there's quite a process that's already existing in that world. And this legislation just helps to expand that and make it wider. So, I know people out there listening may be thinking, oh my gosh, we're giving bad food to people, but it really is food that by the store or restaurant standard may need to be taken off the shelf, but still is acceptable by food handling standards for people to consume.
Well, thank you. Those are all the questions that I have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor, could I just ask, so the staff report says the task 6 is the cost is not to exceed 10 grand. I thought I heard it's 30 grand. So could somebody help to clarify that?
Yes, so when I was writing the staff report, the COG had not had the rates for task 6 prepared yet. So based on conversations I had with them and with Lana on the phone, that's the rate that we came out to. And additionally, we had more tier 1 and tier 2 businesses than I anticipated. So that also added to the higher amount.
So Adam, is this a cost that the city will absorb? Do the restaurants, the supermarkets, is this shared with them, or who's paying for this? I think I know what you're going to say, but I think that the public needs to know this.
Yeah, and I think, Councilman, I just even taking a step back, this is a city obligated cost. We have to perform various functions under SB 1383, and as Alex shared, I can just speak with the city managers group. When we heard this at the COG level, we knew, especially if you look at the 14 cities, many of which are medium to small size cities, which would mean adding staff members to our organization, salaries and benefits to pay for some of these inspections. The COG undertaking an RFP process found an inspection process that provided us a completely packageable, list of requirements that are already done that we have to post to our website, essentially. So more program management work on the COGS end than our end, but we receive some of the benefits. As was previously indicated, Michael hit the nail on the head. It continues to be an unfunded mandate from the state of California. Both the city in coordination with the COG have advocated for additional funding, which has yet to come in. And the reason why I asked for this screen to be brought up is Councilman, you talked with Cal Recycle and talked about all the different inspections we have as an organization, all the different burdens that SB 1383 will share. This is only one part of many. And so this point of the conversation is really a city requirement on our mandatory inspections and ensuring that our tier 1 and tier 2 generators are following SB 1383. And in lieu of hiring additional staff, this allows us to share the cost amongst many jurisdictions.
And my last thing to ask is, was Athens not able to do this work? Did their bid come in higher?
So,
yeah, so kind of unpack that a little bit, because
sure,
they've been very, very good to us, and I hate to, see them not be a part of it, but I understand that if they can't compete, then that's okay. So
it's actually slightly a little more complicated than that. A lot of the cities that are participating in this program, not all of them would have Athens. So true. Athens provides service in various areas. And so again, not something they could do more of the general inspections across the board in residential and commercial, but not this specific aspect of the requirements of 1383. And in fact, Athens encouraged us, and I validated this afternoon just to make sure we dotted our I's and crossed our T's, but this specific program, Athens, would encourage cities to look at more of a regional approach.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And to answer your question, it's Angels fans that will be paying for this.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I said it's Angels fans that will be paying for this. That's the answer to the question.
Well, since you brought up baseball, just let me say that it's 4-1, the Dodgers. So that's good.
Been more to my point. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes,
David?
please. Alex, I'm not trying to blast the messenger, and I realize you're trying to help us with a solution that some creator had no clue how he was going to execute. So thank you for that. We talk about inspections, and I'm curious. You suggested in your potential fee 18 inspections a year. I'm just using that number based on X number of generators. And you say right now we have about 12 of type 1. So is that one inspection per generator per year, or is that 18 visits to each generator per year?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, Councilman. If would you mind going back to the slide where it shows how much visits will be covered? Well, I think you might have passed that a couple of slides ago.
Keep going.
Go forward 2 more.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. So here we mentioned that the city of Glendora currently has 12 tier 1 generators and about 15 tier 2 generators. So under our scope, the city would be able to receive for each of your tier 1 generators up to 2 visits, 2 inspections per generator per year. But for tier 2, it will be up to just 1 visit per tier 2 generator per year. Reason why is our consultants and their experts in the field, they've been working with the county on their county-wide food drop program. They believe that it's not necessary to have multiple inspections for tier 2 generators within 1 year. They're very big venues. So it's actually also quite rare for a second visit to take place on an annual basis for tier 1 generators. But we've included in there just in case. Again, the consultants will only charge us and the city if an actual inspection has taken place. So if none of your second visits are utilized within 1 year, then you can save some money there. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, well, it does. It tells me that we're going through a whole lot of energy to go look at a place once. And that's nuts, but that's not you. That I realize that. Okay. On a generator, if a generator, as I might tell my own wife here at home, she complains that we don't eat all the food she buys, and I always say, don't buy so much. So if a restaurant or a store says, I'll try to figure out what the fine line edge is, and I might run out versus throw out. That makes sense. So they tighten up their purchasing power a little bit. Now it looks like, hey, we're not generating waste food. Is that a plus, or is that something that'll be recognized in the inspection and the record keeping?
Definitely, like when the inspections take place, the consultants will take everything into account of what the generator is doing, but ultimately is to make sure that they have at least agreements in place with their local food recovery organizations. So in the events that there are food waste, then they can very quickly and effectively be able to like give that food to another organization that can make better use of it before they go bad. But our consultants will take everything into account.
All right, hence, I'll stop after this last question. It's a fine line between edible and disposable. Okay, so if it's at a point where a grocery store or a restaurant says, I should not present that, and yeah, it may be edible if it's processed and made available in a very quick amount of time. But most of those processes, by the time it gets arranged for shipping, gets shipped, gets received, gets processed, oops, it just gets thrown away at another destination.
Yeah, and Councilman, I would just add to that on top of the food conversation, as Alex pointed out, these inspections also go through the compliance side of the requirements on the city's behalf, ensuring that not only talking about the food and generation, but also they have all the agreements in place necessary. So a little more in depth than just a site inspection, but also a pretty thorough compliance inspection as well.
Okay.
Which I think furthers your point about a whole lot to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex, and Andrea for the great presentation for us.
Thank you, sir.
Crazy solution, but again, not the messenger, so that's fine. Thank you.
Boyer, did you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
So I move item 12.
Second.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alawas, a second by Councilmember Boyer.
No.
Thompson, I apologize. I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis. That passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
And just for clarification, it is in the MOU will be in the amount not to exceed 113,407 over a 3-year period.
Thank you again, Andrea and Alexander, for the presentation.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 13, short-term rental program update and review of occupancy limits. And City Manager Raymond.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. With me this evening, Chief Egan and Jeff Kugel, Community Development Director, to answer any both zoning and safety questions. Staff was asked to come back to the City Council by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer and Councilman Thompson with an overview of the city's short-term rental program and talk specifically about occupancy limits, leaving open a discussion for change. Next slide, please. Just really quickly for those watching at home, not watching the Dodger game, short-term rental is defined as any legally permitted dwelling, usually rented for less than a 30 consecutive day period. This evening's presentation will center around discussions on past short-term rental actions, status update on where we're at with the program, and possible future changes. Next slide, please. About a year ago, the City Council passed an urgency ordinance that issued a 45-day moratorium on all short-term rentals in response to a party rental that made national news during the height of the COVID pandemic. City Council approved an urgency ordinance in October of 2020, regulating short-term rentals, and we also authorized the hiring of HDL to provide program management through a licensing program. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So not just stopping at short-term rentals, the City Council and staff work together to also address party homes in general. Another ordinance was passed on October 27th to update rules and fines for party homes. This is both short-term rentals, privately owned residents, commercial areas as well. Really, the methodology here was to work better with current owners of these facilities, leaning more on education, but leaving room for a more significant enforcement mechanism if possible, culminating in individual subsequent responses of up to $2,500 per instance. Additionally, to round out the actions taken by City Council on this front, in December of 2020, you authorized an ordinance to allow us to recover attorney's fees and nuisance abatement cases, which would include party homes. Next slide, please. Generally speaking, short-term rentals in the city of Glendora, you must have a permit to operate. All short-term rentals must have a business license. They pay TOT, which is transit occupancy tax revenues. They must comply with a good neighbor policy, which we'll talk a little more in specificity next. This is in our hope to minimize potential nuisance conditions that could exist, loud noise, excessive occupancy, for example. And also, we talked previously, the City Council and staff work to clarify and enhance the city's ability to enforce nuisance properties, both short-term rentals and private ownership homes as well. Next slide, please. The good neighbor policy sets forth, if you want to have a short-term rental, you must agree with this policy. It requires availability of a contact 24/7 to deal with complaints. There's a minimum of a 2-night rental to try to stop, to the extent possible, 1-night party homes. There are maximum occupancy limits that are established via ordinance, 2 persons per bedroom, plus 2 in non-bedroom accommodations. This was done to help change the size and acknowledge that different houses are different sizes. In addition, during daytime hours, you can have 10 additional guests. And there's only 1 rental agreement per property per day, stopping several permitted events at larger estates. Next slide, please. Overview: there are currently 25 properties that either have a license or have been in various stations, different status of licensing. Currently, there are 7 active licenses. 4 licenses are delinquent, meaning they're not allowed to operate. They've fallen out of the program. We have 8 properties that started the license program and decided not to move forward. Additionally, we have 6 properties, and this all comes from HDL, who runs the program for us, that are either in process or discovery. Currently, 1 short-term rental is awaiting a business license confirmation. 2, we are trying to validate mailing or contact information for rentals that are being advertised. And 3, we are awaiting contacts back from homeowners that were wishing to advertise their homes for short-term rentals. Next slide, please. Oh, 1 back, please. To date, HDL's contact. Oh, 1 forward. It's sensitive tonight. 2 forward, 1 back. There you go. So to date, we've touched base with 38 unique property owners, 25 of which have begun various stages that we just talked about of licensing. The city has brought in over the past year about almost $6,000 in TOT revenue. The city's webpage where all the information is listed here, and so is contact information for those people who are interested in short-term rental properties. Next slide, please. This is currently a map of the city where the active short-term rental licensing is. As you'll note, it truly is all over the city, not centered in one specific location. Next slide, please. We'll just add that the last slide is a map of attachment B in the staff report, which lists every single short-term rental that we've either had by address location, if you'd like to look at it. Since October 2020, when the city council adopted the ordinance for short-term rentals, we've had 20 calls for service regarding noise and occupancy limit complaints. 13 of those calls were from a single resident. All of these calls resulted in one citation that was issued. There was a short-term rental that was operating during the city's moratorium period. That homeowner was cited, paid that citation, and has now moved forward with a licensed short-term rental that is currently operating. In addition to short-term rentals, over the past year, the city's received closer to 600 calls for service for noise or party homes. These are both private. These are privately owned residents for the most part. This has resulted in 6 citations issued under the city's new party house ordinance that we talked about earlier, which goes from a 0 first-time warning up to $2,500 per instance. Next slide, please. A specific conversation is requested by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer and Councilman Thompson is sort of clarifying the current rules as they exist with occupancy limits. So there's a maximum occupancy we talked about earlier of 2 persons per bedroom and 2 in non-bedroom accommodations. For example, if there was a pull-out bed in a living room, in addition to those overnight limits, there's an additional daytime capacity of 10 additional individuals. To illustrate this, we're going to talk about an example that we actually provided the city council in October of 2020 when the ordinance was being adopted. Next slide, please. And that is if we use a 3-bedroom home, overnight occupants allowed under the ordinance would be 8 individuals. Those would be 2 occupants times 3 bedrooms, and then 2 occupants in non-bedroom accommodations for a total of 8. Additional daytime guests would be 10. So total guests or occupancy of a short-term rental between the hours of 10 a.m. or 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. would be 18. Total guests between the hours of 10:01 p.m. and 6:59 a.m. would be 8. Again, every different type of home, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom, would have a scale that matched. The only caveat is daytime guests are a total of 10 regardless of the home. So really it's the individuals that are allowed to stay overnight, which would change. So this specific example is for a 3-bedroom home. Next slide, please. And so tonight, it was just for a general update of the city's short-term rental program, brief history of how we got to where we did, and open up to the city council for any questions in future direction as it relates to our program. With that, turn it over to you, Mayor, and again, Chief Egan and Jeff Kugel are standing by to answer any specific questions. Thank you very much.
Well, this started out as a conversation where personally I misunderstood the maximum occupancy that we could have at each unit, but it has turned into something so much larger than that. And I'd like to speak on it briefly. And I think this is going to be a longer conversation than what we're just going to have here tonight. One of the things that I found, I think everybody knows housing is my passion, and I'm on a variety of housing committees, and we're discovering that the short-term rental issue is becoming huge in different parts of the country, and especially here in Southern California in a variety of different cities. The one thing that comes to mind is that people that are using short-term rentals are actually taking housing units off of the market. We all know we have a housing shortage in California, and we need additional permanent housing for people to live in. And every short-term rental that is used in that way actually takes a property off of the market that a family could be living in. I've also discovered that there's a number of different things that are happening. This has turned into huge business, as we all know. But first, there's a lot of very, very large companies that are going out and buying a lot of housing inventory. There are companies that may own hundreds, if not thousands, of short-term rentals all over the country. And so it's not just a family that might want to rent out their unit when they're out of town or something to supplement their income. This has become a new type of hotel business. And that's not what any of us were looking for. The idea also is that we have a lot of people that are taking homes and turning them into businesses by taking a typical single family home and maybe redressing it to have 8 bedrooms in a 2,000 square foot home with a small kitchen and a small living area where people can utilize and have a lot of people living in those homes. They're taking single family homes and turning them into 2 and 3 different units with maybe 3 kitchens in it so that they can rent out 3 different spaces in one location. The addition of SB 9 and the influx of ADUs that we're getting also complicates the issue, because people are going to be able to rent out even more spaces on one single family home lot. So there's a variety of different things that come into play. And I'm just going to share some of the things that I've seen that other cities are doing that we may want to consider. I'm afraid we may have created the ordinance to control these a little bit in haste without having enough information to make a good decision. But, first off, the limit, the way we have it set up now, it makes it prime for people to take a home and turn it into a 10 or 12 bedroom home to increase the occupancy in a property. So there's a lot of cities that'll have a total occupancy limit of maybe 8 or 10 people, regardless of the time of day or night. And, so it does limit the number of people. It doesn't have it set up per bedrooms and per size of the property. There's also a lot of cities that limit the number of permits per owner. So you can't have somebody come in and buy 20 homes and create a whole new industry within your community of rental units, short-term rental units. So we have the ability to limit the number of permits that we could issue to each individual owner. Also, a lot of communities limit the number of days annually that properties can be rented. So they can't be rented a total of 365 days. It seems like the number is somewhere between 90 to 120 days that they're being limited to, but that is something that we didn't take a look at. One idea that I saw, because let's face it, this is a business just like any hotel, is that the owner of the property's phone number should be made public. It should be available for anybody in the neighborhood to reach out. If you live close to a hotel and there's a ruckus going on at the hotel, you can call the hotel and say, hey, I'm having an issue with your guests that are staying there, and this needs to be dealt with. You can't do that, even with our good neighbor policy. It gets the police involved and you have to call the police. So the idea of making the owner's phone number public, because they are in essence running a business at this point. A lot of cities are restricting parties. I looked some things up to try to figure out a way to define a party, and there's not really a way to do it that I'm seeing that makes sense other than limiting the number of participants, but that's also an additional option. And then there's also a number of cities that restrict these to only certain types of zoning. So the short-term rentals are not allowed to be in single-family zoning or R1 zoning that we would have here in the city of Glendora. So, those are just some of the various ideas. I'd like to hear if this is an issue with anybody else. If I'm the only one that has an issue with it, I'm okay with that. But in Glendora right now, we don't have a whole lot of short-term rentals. As other cities are having a problem and then having to deal with trying to restrict them, that moves more and more short-term rentals into other communities. Adam shared with me an issue that they're having out in the desert with so many of the desert communities are putting restrictions in place that Palm Springs seems to have a glut of short-term rentals. Right now, it's almost 3% of their residential units in the city of Palm Springs are being used for short-term rentals. So I'd rather us get in front of this and address it if we think there's a need to have more restrictions, or there are a lot of cities that are just banning this completely. And I will admit, I was the one on the council here that did not think putting a lot of restrictions in place was a good idea in the beginning. But after I've done my homework and looked into this, I am much more favoring more restrictions and trying to get a handle on this before it becomes a problem, if not the outright banning of short-term rentals completely within the city of Glendora. So that's my 2 bits. I'd love to hear what everybody else has to say.
Councilmember Thompson.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Gary, thank you. And I embrace much of what you just said. I want to say a real special thanks, and I think we all agree that staff has moved this along in yeoman time. Adam, Jeff, Chief, Bill, thank you for the incredible work and the assessment that you've done to get us to this point. I really appreciate that, and I think we all do, and I think that it has helped stem some of the issues that we had. I'll just make mine short. I think Gary has covered a lot of ground, and I do agree with him that I think that we don't have time tonight to unpack it all. But I would embrace and really endorse the thought of putting the owner's phone number out there. That seems like a simple thing and probably something that we should have done. But when we were starting from scratch, we've come a long way. So I would certainly hope that we could do that. And at the end of the day, I'm okay with what the maximum is, but I could see how easily that maximum could be stretched in light of what Gary has said and how some of these homes are being used. And I would like to have a real hard max at maybe 10, 12 period, and just be able to limit that. With that, I do agree with Gary that I think there's a lot of areas here that we probably need to spend some time thinking about and having staff speak into. But with that, that's all that I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly embrace the idea and wonder, can we do it immediately, putting that contact information on the public application and make that a process that's upfront. The nuances that Gary brought up, I guess I'm not a deviant person, so I never figure out how to beat the rules all the time. He brought up some good evidences that certainly I think we need to be alert to. And, I guess, planning can tell us, can I go in and just reconfigure my house and create bedrooms and things within the walls that exist? Maybe those are things we should keep a watchful eye out for. But some good discussions and some things to look at if it becomes an issue. Hopefully the current usage is not a negative and that it's neighbor friendly and successful at this point. We don't have to go into those realms, but perhaps we ought to have some things in our cadre ready to go if it looks like it's coming down the pike that we need to make some adjustments. What those might be. Beyond that, thank you for the report and the update.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to extend on what Mendel had said that, I believe that staff has done an incredible job in a short amount of time. We put the emergency ordinance in place. They did a lot of research, which is incredible research, and found out some great items to put in there to make it as fair as possible, but still give us the access that we needed. And that was part of the issue, the access. I'm in agreement that part of the application, I think it'd be great to have the owner's phone number and contact information put in there, accessible on a public basis. But the question I have for staff is, since we're coming up on a year's time on this, do we see a tapering of contacts or phone calls or folks complaining about some of these issues, or is it stable, or is it dropping? What's the trend line?
Trend line is going down, sir.
Is it a steady down, or is it a drop off? Or I'd like to hear from you folks. I mean, is there a problem that we need to address, or is there not a problem?
Well, the actual, I mean, obviously party calls are party calls. We're always going to have those in the city and in the community, but calls relative just specifically regarding STR possible violations or good neighbor policy violations, those have diminished significantly. As indicated in Mr. Raymond's staff report, of the 20 calls of service that we've had for STRs in the past 12 months, 13 were directed at one particular location. So that leaves 7 at additional ones throughout the city. So those numbers are relatively low.
So if we did a wait and watch, if there is an issue, then we can address it that time, because we've spent quite a bit of money and time and effort in putting this together. Can't imagine how many thousands of dollars we did with staff time and attorney fees. But I think that it was a really solid program that we have going forward. And if the trend line is indeed dropping down, and a good majority was with one home, I don't see a huge issue here moving forward. But I think it is a good step forward, though, to add the contact information for the owners so that we can get a hold of them, or the public can get a hold of them as quick as possible.
Councilman, I would just add to that, Councilman. I know the council's been supportive of always, reevaluating programs, and it sounds like phone numbers so far, and that's in the neighbor policy. We can update that administratively and work with the various permittees. Changes to occupancy limits would require us to come back with an ordinance. And if that's the direction of the council, we could always come back at that time and address other concerns that were raised or look into. We could talk about permitting for number of bedrooms, for example, and tie occupancy to also permitted rooms from the city's record, if that helps solve some of those concerns. But just in a nutshell, they're not an issue right now. Nothing's been as big as what it was when we had that first evening's activities, and Bill's firm did a pretty wonderful job helping navigate a lot of that for us long term. But we'd be happy to come back with additional research if that's the direction by the council as well.
Thank you for that, Adam, and thank you, Matt.
One last question. Do we think we have businesses occurring around our program that we may not be aware of?
Councilman, in what specific regard, or do we have private companies that own homes? Is that?
Sorry, do we have short-term rentals being managed as a business that we are not aware of, or in?
One of the unique instances in all of this is enforcement, because we keep chasing. It's a difficult task. One of the things in speaking with HDL, I will tell you, we found out that some homeowners, as the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, when businesses are involved specifically, they tend to take multiple sets of pictures so the homes all look different, even though they're the same home, and post those on multiple sites. And that requires then, in this case, HDL to track all of and run those down. So originally when HDL thought we had 54 unique postings, turned out we had 38 when it was all said and done. Jeff, do we have any other, from a business side perspective, on people that are turning more of the hotel approach from not doing permitting on rooms and so on and so forth?
You mean people doing interior remodels of homes and increasing bedrooms? We haven't analyzed that in any way. I mean, if I'm aware of one instance where someone did do a remodel that included the addition of a lot of, bedrooms, reconfiguration of the house. And I think there was some code enforcement action on one that I'm aware of, but there's not huge or large numbers of cases that I'm aware of where that's occurring.
Jeff, if I could ask a question, are there any restrictions as to the number of bedrooms, or for that matter, the number of bathrooms or kitchens that could be put into any single family home?
No, there's not in the code. No, in the zoning code, there's not. When you get to, usually when you're talking about, homeowners doing an addition to the house, there's limitations on the size of a house. There's a floor area ratio in a single family lot. Typically, it's unusual for people to add, more than one kitchen unless they're doing an accessory dwelling unit, which has its own set of regulations, and accessory dwelling units can't be rented for short-term rentals under state law and our code. So most of the time the additions are for additional square footage, usually master bedroom remodels, those types of things. I don't have data on this, but I don't believe there's a lot of cases where people are putting 10 bedrooms in a house, that type of thing.
Well, and again, a lot of the things that I brought up tonight are not issues here in the city of Glendora. They are issues in other communities from different reports that I've read and people that I've spoken to. So I agree with you, Michael. It might be overreach to do too much right now, but unless anybody else has anything, I would like to at least make a motion that we amend our ordinance to include a maximum occupancy of 10 guests per parcel, not per unit, but per parcel, and then make the owner's phone number public in our good neighbor policy.
Second that.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I can get clarity, that would be 10 maximum day and night, just in totality. And would it be not to an exceed amount? For example, a 1-bedroom home would only allow, let's say, 4 people, or is it 10 just as the standard number? Because I could foresee potentially a very small unit having 10 people may cause additional concerns as well.
Well, except for the fact that you find most of the landlords, the business people that are doing this, are not going to want 10 people in a 1-bedroom home. So
don't disagree.
So I believed in order to make it simple, I would like to just make it a 10-person maximum per parcel.
Okay.
You're moving to discard the sleeping formula.
Well, you know what? Let me change that. We could still make it, leave our formula in place, but make it a 10-person maximum.
Okay. And that includes daytime guests. So essentially,
including daytime guests.
The nighttime limit is the limit. We would remove the daytime guests, keep the formula not to exceed 10 people.
Yes.
Okay.
So Gary, maybe I can jump in. So what is the nexus of this concern, since it's tapering off, we have very little complaints? Are you looking to the future that we're gonna have a problem, or what's the reasoning behind limiting the property rights?
Well, the issue with short-term rentals is huge in a lot of areas. Right now in San Diego, they're estimating that over 2% of their residents right now are currently short-term rentals. And so I think it's important that we get ahead of the curve on this. I'd be supportive of a lot more restrictions, but you're right, we don't have any issues right now. But I would like to at least see this in place in order for us to make sure that the only people that are utilizing short-term rentals in the city of Glendora are people that are here visiting and staying in those rentals.
So are you trying to dissuade more short-term rentals by putting like a poison pill out there with limiting the number of folks?
I'm trying to dissuade it becoming a business that is being set up in our residential neighborhoods.
Well, it is already a business with the short-term rentals. So you just don't want it to grow.
Exactly.
And I'll give you an example. On my block, which the homes are smaller than some of those houses that we're familiar with in other parts of the city, there is a home that has essentially 2 units. They've created 2 units and they have rented out both for short-term rental and created issues for the neighbors on both sides. It's already a home that HDL is on top of and is being followed through, but that's a situation where in a neighborhood where you wouldn't expect it, someone already took advantage of that to create 2 rentals on 1 lot. And it's created noise and other bad behavior by the people renting that place. So I think definitely the phone number, making that public would alleviate some of the heartache and maybe resolve a few issues before people have to call the police.
So we don't already have a single rental per address regulation in part of our ordinance?
It does read on there that it's 1 rental per property, and we can help. And I think of what we're hearing here, Mayor Pro Tem, if I'm not mistaken, is to help clarify that specific language to specifically exempt multiple properties on the same parcel.
Are you sure our ordinance says 1 rental per parcel?
It's in the good neighbor policy that's limited to 1 rental per property per night, but I can understand where there would be some miscommunication there.
Okay, yeah, I read that as you can only rent it out to 1 guest or 1 group of guests. You can't have 2 different families staying in the same home.
And I was indicating that your part of your request is to seek clarity on that specific part. So it's the formula not to exceed 10, but limiting the total to 1 parcel, no matter the number of buildings.
Well, actually, that wasn't my request. My request was a maximum of 10 people per parcel.
Okay.
So if you happen to have 2 separate rentals on 1 parcel, that you can only have a total of 10 on the entire parcel.
Yeah.
That's easier that way.
So we could have situations with our formula that we have, that we could have actually more people on a parcel because they have the capacity to do so, correct?
No, it's only 1. You can only have 1 short-term rental on a parcel. You can't in a single family zone.
No, I meant the number of occupants.
The number of occupants is 2 per bedroom at staying overnight, 2 per bedroom plus 2 for who we're staying in non-bedroom facilities, and then overnight, and then during the day 7 a.m. to 10 you can have up to 10 guests. So as I'm understanding what Councilmember Boyer is saying, he would be okay with something like 2 people per bedroom, not to exceed a total occupancy or guests of 10 people at any time, period, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes.
Yes.
So if someone wanted to rent this out for a wedding and have some guests over, that could not happen.
It could not, no. Not unless it's not going to exceed 10 guests.
And depending on the size, though, there would still be a special events permit exemption. You can have a property that has a special event up to, I think it's, Jeff, is it 6 a year?
I think it's like 4.
4 events a year. So there still could be a wedding at that property, but you'd have to go through the special events process.
And that would supersede the ordinance for the short-term rentals?
Technically, they could both happen concurrently.
But I don't think that they could spend the night, the wedding.
No, but the dialogue was that no one can be, not more than 10 people can be on that property in a given time period.
I would just say nothing though would stop the owner of that home from applying for a special events permit on behalf of whoever wanted to rent that property and do it. I was just saying that there are a specific process for special events, for larger events.
And that would supersede the maximum of 10.
I think one observation is based on the number of police calls is that people who own homes are having many more guests over at their homes, as evidenced by over 500 loud party calls. Usually short-term rentals are not used in that way, and that's why there's not as many calls with them.
Well, I think you're also talking about two different permitting systems. So you'd get one permit under one permitting system and another permit under another permitting system.
Right.
So it's not that one supersedes the other, it's that there are two different systems that you can get permits under.
I just want to verify that they can run concurrent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not a good idea, but yeah.
I mean, the special events permit would require noticing of neighbors and providing a traffic plan and all that other stuff, so.
I don't know, I'm concerned if you limit, just picking the number 10. There's 6-bedroom homes that are legitimate. I got one up the street from me, 6 bedrooms. That could be 14 people overnight. And then you're saying no guests.
I mean 12.
No, 6 plus 2 in a non-bedroom situation by our formula would make 14.
But it would be a maximum of 10, so that house would be limited to 10, regardless of the number of bedrooms.
10 regardless of the formula.
Can we split the motion into two pieces? One to put the phone number out there and the other is to go to maximum of 10?
You can if the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion
That's what I've
withdraw
asked.
their motions and restate them. Otherwise, you've got a motion on the floor and a second. Sounds like it's time to vote to see where the council is.
So are we amending that motion to include then Councilmember Alawas's making of the owner's phone number public? And
No.
is that acceptable?
No, that's already there, Elvia, under
It's
the
already
mayor.
there, okay. Okay, so just the motion then to amend to a maximum of 10-person occupancy, including daytime guests per parcel. Motion by council.
And to add the owner's phone number.
And yeah.
And to add the phone number, yes.
I was asking Gary if he would amend his motion.
No, let's see if this is acceptable, and if not, then we'll go from there.
Okay, so there's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem. Go ahead.
So just to be clear, this is going to require an ordinance amendment. So the direction is to direct staff working with the city attorney's office to bring back an ordinance amendment that would limit maximum occupancy to 10 people per unit and would require the owner of a short-term rental to provide a phone number which would be publicly published.
And Bill, that would be the policy, that would be through the policy, not the ordinance. That would be the neighbor policy.
The good neighbor policy. Okay, fair enough.
And again, to be clear, it would be 10 people per parcel, not per unit.
Okay, 10 people per parcel.
So now, just so that we're clear, this is directing staff to bring back an amendment to the good neighbor policy, correct?
Well, Elvia, if I can, the first one is an ordinance for the occupancy limits. The phone number is the good neighbor policy.
Got it. Thank you. Second is the good neighbor policy. The first is the ordinance amendment. Okay, so we're gonna do a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer and a second by Councilmember Thompson. I'm gonna take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas?
No.
Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Davis?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That was a yes, Elvia.
Yes, okay, thank you. And that passes 3-2.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 14 under unfinished business, consideration of an ordinance and resolution regulating parking on public property and city alleyways. Keith Egan.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, general public watching. We are here again, and I think we are at that point where we have amended and amended and taken a lot of direction to get where we are. So I'll start with my presentation, and then hopefully we can get through this. Next slide, please. Well, beginning back in March 9th, 2021, robust city council and community conversations were conducted addressing alleyway parking. We got a lot of feedback through various mechanisms, both public comment through the various times that we have taken this topic to council for either discussion or attempts to develop an ordinance. We've also undertaken a lot of community conversations involving a community outreach with letters and a Zoom call with LA County Fire and Athens and others, so that we could gather as much data both from the community member and other stakeholders regarding this topic. Staff, shout out to Public Works. Allison's team has been phenomenal in this approach. This is a two-pronged issue, obviously. There is both a heavy engineering component, both in identifying what an alley is. We have both improved and unimproved. We also have a lot of different alleys in a lot of different shapes and configurations. And there was a lot of confusion on first go around about segments and portions and things like that. And so staff really did a lot of work behind the scenes to solidify everybody's comments and try to take everything to find a common ground resolution to get us where we are today. We also provided examples of parking scenarios. Again, feedback from LA County Fire and Athens and the community outreach. It is important to note that there are those community members who are both for and against alleyway parking restrictions. Some people don't want anything done, and some people want very heavy regulation in the alleyways. So we're trying to blend all of those conversations and to find some common ground in here. Next slide, please. We also did a bunch of site inspections. We did this both staff-wise, myself, city manager, various public works employees, and our independent contractor. That encompassed doing mapping, as I stated before, vehicle counts, looking at call data research, looking at various examples, widths, and looking at alleys from a holistic point of view. This information's been presented to the City Council on these 4 separate dates: May 11th, 14th, August 26th, and July 13th. Information, very robust information, data collection, including maps, examples, all of those things can be found and accessible online through our meetings portal, through the city website. They were not included in this to perform. I didn't want to bog it down with a lot of information. Our goal tonight is to say that we've distilled down all of these community interactions, council, staff, and various resources, finding that common ground, getting to where we are tonight for first reading of the new municipal code and accompanying resolution. Next slide. Following the August 24th City Council presentation, staff was directed to amend and make changes to both the draft ordinance and the accompanying resolution. As I stated, we needed to clarify the term alleyway segments. Also included in that was a task for staff to provide a better identification of alleys. That would be a numerical listing of alleys and a corresponding map, so that specific areas or specific segments can be clearly identified, so that there was no ambiguity whether it was an east-west portion or north-south, or a smaller portion versus a longer segment of an alley. So we took a lot of time and care, and staff developed a map and a corresponding list that gave us a really clear and concise look at the alleyways in Glendora. We also took on the task of, as council has directed, or at least we are headed towards, identifying a procedure for community member exemption requests. Next slide, please. As we talked about this, there needed to be a mechanism to streamline the process and provide a staff level determination for exemption. So as we developed the ordinance, we amended Ordinance 10-12-100. This is the newly amended draft of this code. And it incorporated a map identifying the numbering alleys of areas, defined those alleyways and segments in those portions, gave it a numerical identifier number so that it was clear and it was more concise, both in the resolution and for community members to identify where they live. And as I stated, incorporated a process for staff level determination of exemptions. That staff level determination also has the caveat that there's an option for an appeal. So if a staff determination rejects a community or a segment request for an exemption, that appeal can be directed to the city council and heard at a city council meeting, and determination and guidance can be directed to staff based on that. Next slide, please. We present tonight, the consideration is an amended draft of the alleyway ordinance. This will be first reading. Second reading was in the 4 weeks ago previous council meeting, but based on the substantial amount of changes, this will again trigger a first reading. So we've removed the term alleyway portions from subsection A from 10-12-100 and replaced it with the term segments. Segments then clearly are defined in the resolution under subsection E. And those, and again, additionally, subsections B and C of the ordinance were updated to identify the actual staff member body that does those reviews for community exemption requests. That body is the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, which is Allison can probably speak to this better than I, but it's a 3-person member panel, which is the city manager or assistant city manager, the police chief, and the public works director, looking at those requests. Next slide, please. Again, as I stated, it includes a mechanism for an appeal to the city council should that rejection come from this traffic safety advisory committee. So it allows that community member to have, or that segue or that segment of a community member alleyway section to appeal our decision, our staff's decision to the city council should they disagree. Our draft resolution was also updated to identify the 5 alleyway segments in 4 general area locations recommended by staff from this proposed ordinance. Again, not to rehash, but those sections were examined by public works, engineering staff, along with code enforcement employees from the police department, examining parking restrictions, both painted curbs, signed, timed parking, and access in those alleyways. And so those 5 individual unique alley segments in those 4 general locations are included in the resolution for exemption at this time. The exemptions have been identified so that they are numerically identified, as I stated before, and the map and the numerical identification, that corresponding list and map, are attachments A and B in the agenda item. Next slide, please. So here we are, a recommendation. I'll read the code, the recommendation in its entirety so that we're clear. So tonight I am asking on behalf of staff, again, public works staff and PD staff worked in great concert to make this happen. Introduced for first reading an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the City Council adding a new section 10-12-100 to chapter 10.12 entitled Stopping, Standing, and Parking of Title 10 Vehicles and Traffic of the Glendora Municipal Code to regulate and prohibit parking in alleyways. Waive full reading and read by title only. And adopt a resolution, and this resolution is titled, "A Resolution of the City Council Designating Alleyway Segments Pursuant to Glendora Municipal Code 10-12-100 subsection E, authorizing the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee to entertain, review, and make determinations pursuant to the Municipal Code 10-12-100B to exempt alleyway or segment thereof from prohibitions contained in the Municipal Code 10-12-100A, and approving and adopting certain initial alleyway parking exemptions pursuant to the Glendora Municipal Code 10-12-100. And that concludes my report. I am, of course, available for questions as well as Allison. And I hope that we have undertaken everyone's tweaks and interests and amendments to this and tried to come up with a most comprehensive section to address this issue. Thank you.
I know that everyone has had the opportunity to look at this in advance and hopefully ask most of your questions at that time. But just in case you have any last minute questions, Councilmember Friedendahl.
Yeah, thank you. I have no questions. I do want to thank staff, PD, and Public Works, Legal for the strenuous effort to get this correct. I do believe it serves all of the alleyways in the community properly, with opportunity for hearing some opportunities for change if necessary on a section by section basis. Do appreciate that. And I encourage our residents to embrace this, believe in it, be good neighbors, and then look at their alleyway that abuts their properties and give it the same love that they give the front of their property, and not just throw things under the rug, but give it some care and concern, be those good neighbors we're all hoping to get. I approve this and I'm ready to move on it unless we have other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer?
No additional questions. I appreciate the effort and hopefully this will work out. Thank you.
Councilmember Alawaz.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to extend my thanks to staff. You guys did a great job. You did it, encapsulate all of our concerns, and you did a really good job in trying to collate all that together. So thank you very much. I do have a request. If any segment or alley is exempted, can this be put on the city manager report, on the biweekly report that comes to council, just so that at least we're aware of it?
Sure, be happy to do that.
And secondly is, Chief, you mentioned in the past reports that you given that, it was a policy in the past that you didn't enforce it for various reasons. It was a policy. Will you be directing staff to write a policy and the police manual of how to deal with this in conjunction with the ordinance that we have?
No, that won't be required, sir. Now that there's regulatory code that basically omits the exemption, no overnight parking can be done in alleyways. So overnight parking will be enforced. Obviously, any calls for service that are generated from community members who find a car parked in an alley that's not one of the normally, one of the 5 individual segments that are exempt from it, it'll generate a call for service, and we will address them case by case. We're also going to undertake a pretty robust time period where we warn people for quite a while, upwards of 2, 3, 4 weeks, so that we get people on board with the concept before we're issuing the citations. But no policy needs to be adopted. Once it's adopted into code after second reading and it becomes effective, I'll put out a mandate that we will begin enforcement, and this is the subsection and the sections that can be used to cite in alleyways if a violation is found.
So is a mandate like a memo that goes out to the folks?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And are those memos, are they archived within your system?
Generally not, because they're just They're just not. It's not a policy or procedure. It's more of an awareness that a new code has been adopted and that new marching orders have come down, and that the code is there. We didn't have a code before, and so there was a lot of wiggle room about time and distance and things in there. Now it's clearly established what is and what is not, and it will be addressed.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome, sir.
Councilmember Thompson.
Well, after 8 months, I want to affirm what everyone else has said. Thanks to staff for grinding this out and interfacing with everyone, public, staff, ourselves. Good job, and I would move adoption of this whenever, Madam Mayor, you want a motion.
Right now would be fine.
I'll second that motion.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Thompson, a second by Councilmember Alawas to introduce for first reading ordinance 2061, adding a new section 10.12.100 to chapter 10.12, stopping, standing, and parking of the Title 10 vehicles and traffic of the Glendora Municipal Code to regulate and prohibit parking in alleyways. Waive full reading, read by title only, and to adopt City Council Resolution CC 2021-51 entitled Resolution Designating Alley Segments Pursuant to Glendora Municipal Code 10.12.100E, authorizing the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee to entertain, review, and make determinations pursuant to Municipal Code 10.12.100B to exempt an alley or segment thereof from prohibitions contained in Municipal Code 10.12.100A, and approving and adopting certain initial alleyway parking exemptions pursuant to Glendora Municipal Code 10.12.100. I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Chief, it just seems like we should have some sirens and lights going off to celebrate this historic time.
Well, you'll see me one more time in 30 days, but that should be even shorter than tonight. So thank you all very much. I appreciate that. And the score is 5-1. Just a quick update for you.
Right.
It takes us to item 15, revised expenditure plan for the American Rescue Plan Act funding. And I invite Assistant City Manager Lopez to report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Pleasure to be before you again this evening to present a revised expenditure plan for the ARPA funding. If we can move on to the next slide, please.
The presentation, hold on. I'm sorry, hold on one second. Having a little bit of an issue here. That was put in there, hold on. Apologies, hold on. Here we go. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Thank you, Elvia. We can move on to the next slide. So just quickly, by way of background, in March of last year, President Trump signed the CARES Act. That action included some funding for local jurisdictions. There were some restrictions for direct allocations, but the city of Glendora was able to receive an allocation through the state of California, totaling just over $640,000. The city also benefited from an allocation of just under $500,000 from the Community Development Block Grant program. It included a special allocation under the CARES Act program called CDBG-CV funding that was used to support a small business recovery program as well as an emergency rental assistance program. Next slide, please. Subsequently, in March of 2021, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA as I'll refer to it. This bill also included funding set aside specifically for local jurisdictions The city of Glendora was allocated just over $7.5 million in this funding. And as I've reported to you previously, we'll receive the funding over two installments. The first of the half of that installment was received in May of this year, and we anticipate that the second half of that installment will be received in May of next year. Next slide, please. The council previously considered a draft expenditure plan for the ARPA funding on September 14th. City Council provided direction to staff and input to adjust some of the funding allocations for the programs and projects that were proposed at that particular time to better outline how the spending would be outlined over a 2-year period to be commensurate with the funding that we would receive from the federal government, as well as with the clear direction to front load a lot of the community facing programs to help support residents in the small business and nonprofit community. We are consistent with that direction. We are here today with that revised expenditure plan to present for your input, consideration, and approval. Next slide, Elvia. Quickly, there are a lot of uses that ARPA funds can be used for. Primarily fall into 4 categories. One is to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, to respond to workers that are performing essential work during this public health emergency by providing premium pay to those eligible workers, to provide government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the pandemic. This is essentially revenue replacement for local jurisdictions. And 4th, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. These 4 categories are fairly broad. They are implemented by documents that have been published by the U.S. Treasury, both the interim final rule as well as a frequently asked questions document that are posted and has been updated since it was initially published. Next slide, please. Oh, I preempted myself. The draft expenditure plan was informed at the time when we presented it to you, was informed by those documents that were prepared by the U.S. Treasury, but also through informal discussion with our community partners to kind of help identify what those needs in the community are. Also feedback from all of you as we've been able to kind of discuss what options were available for the City Council's consideration. Next slide, Elliot. So taking all of that feedback under consideration, what's on the screen now is the revised expenditure plan for ARPA funds. For that first year allocation, we intend to front load funding for homelessness. This would be homeless services as well as interim housing opportunities. We're talking about small business support, nonprofit support, some potential investments for virtual city hall improvements, as well as improvements as part of the anticipated City Council chambers renovation project. In the second year, we are outlining funding for both the village public space improvements, parks, and as well as some capital improvements to our library plaza and some HVAC improvements there. We have approximately totaled $3.5 million worth of expenditures in year 1 and just about $4 million worth of expenditures in year 2. Part of the logic of front loading our community facing programs is if a lot of businesses apply for funding or a lot of nonprofits apply for funding, it will provide the council with an opportunity to reallocate some of this funding towards those programs or towards those needs that we see emerging in our community. Part of the recommendation tonight on your staff report is to direct staff to return on a quarterly basis so that we can provide you progress reports on how fast or slow these programs are progressing. Next slide, please, Elvia. I want to highlight two items, the small business and nonprofit rescue grant programs. You'll note that as attachments to your staff report this evening are the guidelines for each of those programs as well as the applications. We're very pleased to share and report that we will be partnering again with the Glendora Chamber of Commerce to administer these programs alongside the city's economic development staff. Generally speaking, these funds may be used to mitigate financial hardship that has resulted from this pandemic. Nonprofits have the added benefit of being able to request funding to provide those services that are eligible for our community. So they'll be able to request funding as an organization, but also as a service provider for our community. Applicants do not need to be members of the chamber to apply. So this is open to all of our businesses in our community, and applicants are eligible for this funding even if they received other forms of financial assistance. Example would be the the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP as it's called. So we highly encourage all businesses to take a look at these application guidelines and application forms. We do have some requirements of documents that they need to provide so we can verify the information that they're providing us and keep track all of that progress after the funds are released to each of them. Alvia, next slide, please. So with that, it is our staff recommendation that council provide input and approve the revised expenditure plan for the American Rescue Plan Act funding, that you authorize our finance staff to make the necessary budget adjustments and direct staff to provide quarterly updates on the progress of the approved expenditure plan for the ARPA funding. You'll note recommendation number 2 is in red. That is added based on the direction of our finance staff to make sure that we have the authority to actually be able to expend some of these programs and put them in place a little bit more quickly, rather than having to return back to the city council for approval. Of course, as we progress through this plan, particularly as we get into the capital projects, you will see those awards come back to you, as those are a little bit larger ticket items. And with that, Mayor, that concludes my presentation.
Mr. Lopez. Mr. Friedendahl, any questions?
No, thank you for the work. I support it. I do appreciate the periodic updates so we can adjust if necessary on needs and demands. And I certainly like the people, residents, nonprofits up front approach. So thank you for that. I support this.
Thank you. Mr. Alawas.
Thank you, Mayor. Moises, that was a nice report. I know you did a lot of work behind the scenes, and I'm sure you've taken phone calls and emails from each and every one of us in preparing this. No doubt there. So can we articulate again how the chamber is going to get compensated for this moving forward?
Yeah, we intend to make the chamber as whole as possible through this process. As our partner, they are eligible to reimburse their expenditures related to the administration of this program. Through the nonprofit allocation, if you will, we'll be able to make sure that we make that contribution to the chamber.
But that's separate. They can apply for the grant separately, but what about processing the applications?
We will need to enter, thank you for that clarification, sir. We will need to enter into a separate MOU with them so that we can stipulate how we would reimburse them. But the intent is to use the nonprofit allocation to make that funding allocation to them.
Any idea of if it's going to be a percentage basis or per application or how?
No, we don't have that indication yet. That's something that we'll have to talk with Mr. Sina and his staff to make sure that we reimburse them. Typically, something like this we could do on an hourly basis as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine each one's going to be different in the amount of hours it takes. It's like a bank loan, right, Mendel?
Absolutely, sir.
And so, Adam, you articulated a little bit about how the $1 million can be spent for the homeless. Can you reiterate that, how you're going to spend the $1 million? It's not enough to stand up any housing projects, but how would that go about to be spent?
Sir, was that directed at me or Adam?
Either one, take your pick.
All yours, Moises.
I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and answer. Very good question, sir. Part of the reason we didn't label provide specific is similar to the flexibility that we want to give council to kind of reallocate funding. We wanted that flexibility to be able to shift our priorities based on our priorities that we're seeing. Most immediately, we know that we need to provide specialized outreach in the form of clinical therapists to our homeless population. We're looking towards some nonprofit providers to be able to provide that service for us. And so we intend to contract that service out. We want those service providers to provide that service as many days as possible in the city of Glendora to the benefit of our community. We currently have a similar program stood up through some grant funding but that service is only provided to our community 1 day a week, as it's shared with a lot of other jurisdictions in our region. We would also like to use the funding for some interim housing opportunities. We know that as we begin the discussions about enforcement of encampments similar to what the county has undertaken, that we need to provide the resources for those individuals to kind of seek shelter while we clean up those areas that pose some risk to our community. And so we need to have those options available to us. We're also exploring some additional forms of housing. You're correct. $1 million seems like a lot, but it's not a lot to stand up a project or to operate a housing project. But we can certainly put ourselves on the path to provide those services in an interim capacity as we explore those options for our community.
Are you saying like our version of Project Room Key?
Yes, similar to what the city did during COVID, where we contracted some hotel rooms here locally. We're exploring securing some shelter beds at other facilities in our surrounding cities as well.
And so we won't use any of this one-time monies for long-term legacy, such as added staff?
No, that is not our intention. Our intention is to try to augment the services we provide by partnering with other organizations that are already providing that service.
Okay, perfect. And can you iterate a little bit more on the $1.25 million in the second tranche for the public space improvements and the $1.75 million for the parks as it relates to the recovery for the economy?
Sure. I'll start with the village, the proposed improvements to the village. As you know, your community development department has been actively engaged with our community, soliciting feedback and surveys, recognizing the importance of providing safe outdoor spaces as COVID restrictions have impeded at times the conduct of ongoing business in an indoor capacity. We've seen the successful implementation of parklets, and would like to continue kind of that similar type effort along the village, which we recognize as being kind of the center point of a lot of community events that we all benefit from. And so we're looking at improvements along Mina Avenue, both on the west and easterly side of it, the potentiality of placing some other parklets or dining spaces for adjacent restaurants, some outdoor amenities for our community. We're also exploring the idea of bollards to make the space that much more secure. Typically, when we host community events in the village, we need to secure typically water-filled barricades to provide that safe space for folks that are on the street. If we can make that investment on the city's behalf, we can certainly help support those organizations that are doing these types of events on a regular basis. Secondarily, moving on to parks, which I believe was the second part of your question.
Correct.
The FAQs have made clear that investments in parks that have been used over the course of the pandemic are an eligible expense. And the logic there being that while a lot of amenities and facilities had restrictions that prevented people from accessing amusement parks or attending sporting events, that parks played a fundamental role in providing some recreational and mental health benefits, frankly, to a lot of us as we navigated the pandemic in our homes. It gives us an opportunity to help make improvements to those park areas. And if there exists the potential for us to generate some other co-benefits in terms of water savings, then that'll also benefit as we benefit the city as we kind of navigate the drought conditions that the council is fully aware of.
Thank you for that. I'd like to see if I can get council support for carving out a separate line item for mental health. For the simple fact that, there's a lot of folks out there that don't have insurance. We have a lot of small businesses that can't afford it. And this last, year and a half, 2 years has been pretty stressful on a lot of folks. And I know that a lot of our institutions and folks that do provide that service, particularly here in town, are almost overbooked from what I'm hearing. And it's pretty tough on these folks. I know we have a line item for $500,000 for the nonprofits, but these folks are not nonprofit. So I would like to see if I can get support first from council for that carve out and just show that we're serious about trying to help the community in that aspect of it, but also ask staff to come back, since we have HIPAA issues and things of that nature, to figure out how we can delegate that out to an entity that can support that without getting sideways with the HIPAA laws. And secondly, it might be a taller ask, as the President Josina from the chamber has submitted. He said that he can give out all of the requests that he had last time based on the new rules that we have now and not being encumbered by the CDBG fund requirements. I'd like to see if we can increase the $1 million to maybe 1.2 in the front. I know we have leftover, basically $239,000 roughly that we didn't spend on this tranche, and it was moved to the second tranche. Perhaps we can put some of that money into this first tranche if I can get support from the rest of the council for that. But I think it's very important that we address mental health in some fashion.
Great. I'd like to hear from the rest of the council before we proceed with any motions.
Question, Michael, what exactly are you thinking of in when you talk about mental health help?
Well, there's a lot of folks out there that are stressed out. They've either lost their business, they may have lost their job, they may have lost a loved one from COVID, all kinds of things. And I'm hearing that our mental health services folks are stressed out themselves, and they have a lot of folks going after them and, for some help. And they don't necessarily have the support through their insurance company because they might not have insurance, or they may have lost their job, things of that nature. And again, we're in that situation that the staff's going to come back and report back to us. And if the monies aren't being utilized, we can simply put it back into the kitty and use on the second tranche or something else of that nature. We don't know unless we try, but it'd be wonderful to put that out there to let folks know that this is available to them. However, staff can make it happen legally.
So I guess what prompted this? Did you hear something? Have you read something that this is an issue? Because there's no question that what we have all shared in the last year and a half or almost 2 years now has taken a mental toll on everybody. And there's definitely a need for mental health services, but I really haven't, I had another person that I know committed suicide again yesterday. And these types of things are just a little bit overwhelming, but I'm not sure where we would play a role in that. And not that this isn't important and needed. I'm just not sure where the city of Glendora could play a role in that.
We would have to find an entity that could administer this service for us because of the HIPAA laws and the nature of how this would work. And it's something that I feel deeply about. I've been in contact with a number of different service providers. From the simple standpoint, I've been working on the Labyrinth Act and things of that nature. So I've been in contact with them on different issues, but then subsequently they've talked to me about the stress that's out there. And we all know this. We can read it in the papers and a number of articles out there. And we even have our homeless situation that could utilize the service as well. And maybe that could be a dovetail in there perhaps as well, whatever staff comes back at. But I think if we make this available, I believe that the number of folks would probably avail themselves of it. So I know we have a number of organizations in places here in town, even in the village. We have the APU building back there that has a number of psychiatrists and psychologists that are back there providing services.
So are you asking that funds be dedicated to pay for services for patients that may not otherwise have access to them?
Correct. And for staff to come back and to let staff find a way to do this unencumbered. And maybe it goes.
Gary, I'm sorry, Michael.
Go ahead, Mendel. Go ahead.
Well, no, I just didn't know if, Gary was done because I don't want to cut him off.
I was going to call on Mr. Boyer to ask any questions he had or to share his thoughts, and then to go to you, Mendel, before we go down this path any farther. So Gary, did you have anything else you wanted to ask or say?
No, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
I'm very happy with what is out there for us to vote on. I do think that within the homeless line, as our briefing today that David and I had, I heard from staff that mental health is going to be a part of that, and I don't know that I heard it was only for the unhoused, but I think that it could be expanded to others. I don't know that there's enough money to deal with some of the mental health stuff that has been going on. So I don't know what kind of money that we would be talking about, and I would prefer to see what staff can come back with for the mental health assistance that Molo was talking about today, and see if that would suffice in terms of offering some assistance to those folks, as Michael, that you've talked about. I have been able to be privy to a lot of conversations with Joe because of the relationship that my assignment has with him, and I believe that that $1 million is sufficient at this moment in time, based upon the list that I've seen, that would get us going there. And as has been said, on a quarterly update, we'll be advised as to how much we've spent and what the need is. So I guess I'm saying that I'm satisfied with where we are, and I would like us to vote this up or down so we can get especially the chamber and all of that going. I really like what has been, at least what I've heard about the parks and the savings of maintenance, water, all of the facets that go into parks. I frankly wish that we could do all of this now, but I think it's prudent that we segregate it out. So I'm happy to support what staff has given to us, and with the understanding that there's flexibility, and I think that they are hearing what Michael, you have said, and I think what we all share, that there could be some left turns that we don't see and some right turns that we don't see, but we have sufficient amount of money to hopefully be able to make those turns quickly. So I think that's all that I would say. Thank you.
Mendel, would you be amenable to, there's about a little over $200,000 is not spent on the first tranche that we have monies for, to be amenable to putting that into the nonprofit segment and let staff try to figure out how that can be divvied out as far as with mental illness, either for homeless or for other folks as well.
If I can just really quickly clarify, Elvia, can you go back to the slide? And Councilman, I just want to talk about the budget really quick before we talk about leftovers, first tranche and what have you.
Is this the one you're talking about? Which one?
Back one more, Elvia. It has the there you go. Moises, do you care to go over how this compares? Because this is the entirety of the allocation. And I don't want to say there's any left over. We would have to move money around, Councilman, if that was the case. Moises, would you mind going over it just one more time?
Sure. The funding for year one, or the proposed allocation as part of the first year, totals approximately 3.5 million as proposed through this expenditure plan. I believe what the council member is referring is that the first half of the money that's been received totals approximately 3.7 million. So that's what we currently have in hand from the U.S. Treasury. So you're correct. We did not plan, as evidenced in this revised expenditure plan, we're not allocating the full 3.7 that we currently have at hand, partly in large part because that funding is already allocated under the year two allocation. So if there is a desire on the part of the council to move some funding or to create a specific set aside, we will need to make some other adjustments and other line items to make that happen.
So do we have the full 3.7 or do we not have the full 3.7?
We have the 3.7.
So we still have the over the $200,000. We still have that available. First
We
tranche.
we programmed that extra $200,000 as part of the year 2 allocation as a carryover.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is we don't do that and we put it into this one, add it to your nonprofit and let you figure out how you can make it work with mental health support.
And Councilman, what we're trying to say is you'd have to pick one of the other line items out there to subtract 200,000 from.
In the year two. In year two.
Correct.
Yes.
So you can divide it up between the other two, the village park space and the parks.
I'm happy to second Mendel's motion to go with the plan that is proposed to us. While mental health is one of the #1 issues, what you have suggested in paying for people's services is not necessarily the most effective way to address that issue or to use this money. So I am happy to second Mendel's motion.
If
Thank
I
you,
could
Mayor.
ask one other question.
Yes.
Just, what we're doing tonight, we're just giving some guidance. This is not set in stone.
Right.
So as we move forward, if we discover additional needs, we have the ability to come back and make changes to this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we can move forward then with a motion by Councilmember Thompson, a second by Mayor Davis. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I just want to make sure that we're in alignment, that, we can come back and adjust this, and that I understand from our Assistant City Manager that this is ready to go probably by next week. Am I saying that right? Because I don't want to overstate the anticipation of when this program could be ready to go.
Yeah, specific to the business assistance program and the nonprofit assistance program, thanks in large part to a lot of legwork that's already done by Mr. Sina and our economic development staff. We feel very confident that we can get this rolled out and made available within a week.
Okay, thank you. Because I think that that's important for all of us to understand, and then to understand that there's going to be some flexibility, and as long as we understand that we can move stuff around, then I think that that's really good, because everything has got a really important need to it. So thank you.
Yeah.
I would just like to add just a really quick thank you. I see Valerie's on the call this evening, who did an incredible job putting together some of the business application. She and Jeff met with Josina, after we met with Joe to kind of outline some of the program parameters. And I think we're all in agreement that as the public needs change, as council members bring things forward that need to be addressed, that we'll have the flexibility in which to do so. Just because we allocate the funds over a 2-year period, we still have multiple years in which to expend the funds. So a sincere appreciation on my end to Valerie and Jeff and Moises for getting us to this point, and the council members for reviewing all the documentation. We're in a place, as was mentioned at the previous meeting, to get out funds as quickly as we can to those who need it most right now. And we look forward to finding the best way to do that.
Thank you. That takes us to new business, item 16, 2021 holiday season, and discussion of cancellation and or possible rescheduling of City Council regular joint meetings. Deputy City Clerk Elvia Harvey to report. Ms. Elvia.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's City Clerk Sessman that's going to be presenting.
Okay. Your name was on there, but that's
I'm
okay.
so sorry.
That's all right.
Freudian slip.
Madam Mayor, tonight we're here to discuss the upcoming holidays. Holidays are fast approaching, so we just wanted to reach out and request that the city council conduct a review of expected agenda items for the November and December meetings. Staff is expecting, due to the holiday season, that there will be an increase on both public and staff vacation times or leaves during those 2 months. And we request the council review the city council meetings and where they fall during that holiday season and provide us with direction. City council meetings are conducted on the second and the fourth Tuesday of each month. Business items associated with the November and December meetings have been attached to the staff report listing all items we currently know about. One point I do want to make is that staff is not recommending that the city council consider canceling November 9th, just because that is going to be one of the 5 required public hearings associated with the 2020 redistricting. And due to the tight timeframe, staff is not recommending that item be rescheduled. We are okay with us looking at canceling the meeting on the 23rd, because I do not plan on scheduling a public hearing relating to the redistricting on that meeting because of the holiday season, and I think there will be too many people unavailable to attend. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions. We don't anticipate any other significant actions that will impact or require 2 meetings in the month of November and December. There are 2 options before the council to consider. The first option is to direct staff to cancel the city council meetings of November 23rd and December 28th of 2021. Or option 2 is to direct staff to cancel the city council meetings of November 23rd as it falls on the same week as the Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you, Ms. Sussman. Any questions from council? Councilmember Alawas.
I move option 1.
Second.
Right, any other questions or comments?
I guess not.
There's a motion, but you can still comment, ask questions, Mr. Boyer.
Let's vote on it.
Okay, so there is a motion by Councilmember Alawas, a motion by second by Councilmember Thompson. I'll take a roll call. That is to approve option 1, to cancel city council meetings on November 23rd and December 28th of this year. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas.
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Yes.
And Mayor Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Any council members have any closing comments?
The Dodgers are up 7-2, middle of the 9th.
Very good. Anyone else?
No, thank you.
Mr. Raymond or Mr. Winder?
Nothing from me.
Any other department director have any comments? All right, hearing none, then I adjourn this meeting at 9:47 p.m.
Good night, everyone.